Hey everybody, this is Brad again with Copper Pools. Today, the objective is to upgrade my EcoSmarte Turbo to an EcoSmarte programmable unit. And we're going to start on the electrical side. We want to make sure this thing lights up and does all the things that it needs to do before we completely displace this. But there's a big difference between the Turbo model and the programmable. In the programmable automated one, it essentially does all these things for me. I don't have to come down and hit a switch twice a week. And I don't have to add acid to the pool. Really, with the programmable, also known as the automated, I get to really only put phosphate remover in the pool every week. So this is really helpful if we go on vacation. The pool will pretty much take care of itself based on the timers I set for it. And the only thing I'm forgetting to do each week at that point is phosphate remover, and maybe I can convince a neighbor to come in and dump a half cup of that into the pool. And that's really the great benefit of this solution. So the programmable comes with the control unit. It comes with now 3 power leads coming off of it instead of just 2. The power conductors, the leads that go to the CO2 dispensing chamber, and then the leads that go to the electrode chamber. In the CO2 chamber, we're going to go cut this into the plumbing line. Take 7 inches out of the pipe to the return line. We'll make sure that the nozzle is facing along the flow of water, so we're not shoving water into it, water's following it. We'll go install that. A tube will connect this to a CO2 tank. The CO2 tank does not come with this solution. You're going to need to pick one of these up at a nearby welding supply store. So we have this, and this tube will connect them through this valve that fastens into that. So in that scenario, the programmable unit will then dose the pool approximately 4 times per day. Whatever the duration you put in here, let's say you do 40 minutes, it's going to do 10 minutes 4 times a day to kind of keep that pH in a nice soft pH level continuously going. And if you can dial this thing in where you're keeping pH at 7.0, you're winning, because the goal is to be between 6.8 and 7.0. If you overdose your pool with CO2, worst case scenario, 6.7 is as low as it's going to go. But if you overdose with muriatic acid, you can seriously get that thing down near 6 or even further. So it is a much safer solution to use for a pool. It's also fantastic whether you're outsourcing your pool maintenance or you're doing it yourself. So those are the pieces that we're going to have. The other thing I have here is a scale. And this scale, you can pick this up at any local retail store, real cheap. You can pick it up on your favorite online retailer, super cheap. You want a dial scale, not a digital one. You want dial. You want it all to be mechanical. When you put this on the equipment pad, you'll dial it into 0, and you'll place your CO2 tank on it. Because I'm recommending a 20-pound CO2 tank, that means it's going to hold 20 pounds of gas in it. The tare weight on this thing says it's 25 pounds. You sum those two numbers up, 45 pounds. So a brand new tank, you put on the scale, it should measure 45. When the scale gets down to 25 pounds, which is the tare weight of this, it means it's empty. Time for you to swap the tank. My preferred method is to have 2 tanks on hand, one being used, one ready. That way, when you swap them, you can do it right then and there. You don't have to make an urgent trip to the welding supply shop. And in that scenario, you would just take your empty one, put it in the back of your car, and whenever you're out and about running errands over the next 4 to 6 weeks, whatever your consumption rate is, you swap it out at the nearest welding supply shop. Makes it really convenient to have 2 of them on hand. So we're going to start on the electrical side and go from there. Okay, so I've turned off power at the main breaker, and I want to make sure that we're completely safe in doing this project. So the breaker is turned off to this thing. We can check it with our electrical tester when it's time. We're now going to work on the panel side of this, the electrical side of our equation. The door comes off, so I'm just going to get rid of that. There's this unobstructed access. See if we have any lizards living in there, which is normal for me. Now we want to check to make sure we have power off. Power comes up through this conduit here. I have a 2 hots, and it's not beeping continuously. So the bus bars are good. Check them both. And it's just beeping because I'm touching metal, but it would go beep, beep, beep if I had a big problem. So I am in good shape. So what we're going to do when we wire this, unlike the way that we wired the turbo, so you'll see that the turbo cables come up right here, and what we have them done is we have them wired. You'll see that we have line on the left, load on the right. So line, load, and that's for the filter pump. These are for the lights, and these are other auxiliaries. I have the heater actually plugged in over here in auxiliary 2, so there's leads for that. But on the pump side, you'll see that on load out, we've got this little cable that comes from basically this. So we're going to undo that because we really don't need that. I'm going to leave that though temporarily just in case for some reason this thing doesn't power on. I'm going to go back to my turbo. So this is purely going to be a kind of an electrical test. Now, this particular one, we took the power cord off of it. It did have a plug at one point to be plugged in here. Normally what you have to do if there is the plug on there, and that is the way that you want to configure it, or it's the way that your electrician is demanding you configure it, you're going to wind up having to plug it into an outlet that is ideally triggered on and off with the main breaker to the filter pump. That's if you're going to plug it in. When power is lost to the filter pump, you want power lost to the EcoSmarte automated unit, because you don't want to be putting current into those electrodes and water's just sitting still in there. It's just not a good thing to do for that chamber. So keep that in mind. If you're going to use an electrical plug, it needs to be powered back to the same filter pump. So that's what we're going to work on right now. We're going to get this thing in here and we're going to make sure we can test it. Now, one thing I looked at on the inside of the automated unit, in this particular color scheme, brown is your hot, blue is your neutral, and this green yellow striped one is your ground. We're going to lace this through just like it's going to be mounted. And interesting enough, I am able to leave this turbo unit connected if I want to. It's going to have power when the pump kicks on it, and it won't have, if we don't have the electrodes hooked up to the electrode chamber, it's not going to do anything. This wire is presumably going to come out, so I'm just trying to make it so that I'm not going to interfere when I withdraw that wire. Coming up over the top. And again, brown is going to connect to the load side, not the lines. Correction, the line side, not the load side. We do not want this on a relay. Now, interesting enough, I don't think I can reach there, but interesting enough, this power conductor here is coming off this main terminal. The reason why they did that is that this entire main panel, the program, all this stuff, the transform and all that, it's going to come off this main breaker. So you can see that this main breaker goes right to this. So everything is being powered off of that, including the heater. Although the heater, actually I'm incorrect. The heater is down here in auxiliary 3 because the heater needs to have its own breaker. So heater's down here in auxiliary 3. This is auxiliary 2. Auxiliary 2 is going to this outlet down here for this. So basically the main panel, this GFCI will go out, all of this will go out at one time. All right, and we're back, and we have applied power just to show that it is hot. I've got my little sensor here, so I have the brown wire, the hot wire to the EcoSmarte, and it's got power. So we're going to now conduct our test. Got to make sure I stay away from the box. This switch over here is how we apply power, by going up. We're going to apply power. We hear it click on, and it starts with some information about the manufacturer. The language defaults to English, and we're going to hit next. Now the code to get into this to program it is up, down, up, and it's accepted. So I'm going to go ahead and program this thing, and I won't cover that on the camera, but I'm going to program it to make sure that it matches what my programming is here on the main controller for the pool pump. So I want to make sure I match the time and of course the date, and then I also want to match what I'm running the pool time for. And we can check that by using the menu option here and going over to timers. So set day and time is already in there, and we'll go in here to timers. And so we're running the pool from 8 in the morning to 7 at night. We're going to make sure that this matches that, 8 in the morning, 7 at night. So I'm going to work on that. Okay, I've already programmed this now for the timers. I'm going to program for the CO2 dispenser. First, I'm going to turn it to an on setting. Then I should see a red light inside this servo or a relay, if you want to call it that. But basically, it's what opens the valve. And this is red because it's on. And I'm going to then program it to off. And I should see the light go off when I hit next, and the light goes off. Ultimately, I'm going to program it for time, and I'm going to put it at start for 40 minutes per day. And what that will do is it breaks the 40 minutes up into 4 increments of 10 minutes, and it doses the pool for 10 minutes 4 times within that window of the schedule that I programmed before. And then I can up it, and when I do, I can up it by 4 minutes or 8 minutes or anything divisible by 4 to even that out. And what I'm looking for is I'd like to get my pH in the pool to steadily be right around 7.0, ideally, but anything between 6.8 and 7.2 is tolerable, so that I'm going to measure, or basically take a measurement and then adjust, take a measurement and adjust, take a measurement and adjust. And I'll do that over time in order to get that pH nice and balanced. I also set my CO2 to run, I set my copper to run on Saturdays because I like to do my maintenance on Sunday mornings, and then all of the pool chemistries should be at their peak value when I do my maintenance on Sunday morning, and that's a way for me to keep track that this thing is functioning. So now that I've done that, the next stage for us to do is the plumbing side of this equation. We're going to move to that side, and in the return line we're going to cut out and install the CO2 dispensing chamber. Okay, here we are on the plumbing side where we're going to install the new CO2 dispensing chamber. We already have the electrode chamber in this composition. All we're going to do is insert this new piece of the solution into this plumbing right here. And the manual tells you to cut out about 7 inches. I measure this to gap, and it's really about 6 3/4, but PVC changes over time. I would measure it each time, but the manual says 7 inches. In this case, we're going to do about 6 3/4. I have a template for that I'll use that has already been shaped for that, for me to transfer that out. So I'm going to basically put it here. Now, obviously, we're going to have to cut these straps out of the way. We want to get this cable. This cable is actually to the servo here that transitions, actuates, if you want to call it that, between the spa side of this pool and the normal pool side. So we're going to get that out of the way so we don't cut that. And we want that to be well out of the way of the blades. We'll put something there to keep it out of the way. We'll use something like that. And we're just going to go, like I said, dead center of this thing. This is a little template I have for measuring, and we're going to go dead center. So let me just put a mark here. And I use this to make sure that when I'm cutting with a Sawzall that I'm cutting as straight as I can. Like we said, from a distance standpoint, should be that. I will use my tape measure to double check because I think this particular tool I made is a little bit short. So we said we're going to go 6 3/4 is what I measured before. Now there is already, because I just turned the pump off, water in this line. So we're going to see water coming out of this when we cut through it. Not to be worried, the pump is off. And just so you get a perspective of where that's sitting, it's going to sit just like that. You're using the PVC primer or solvent and the glue. There is a clear primer, and it is recommended to use that on all this plumbing. Then you don't get that pink look that you normally see in plumbing. It keeps the plumbing nice and neat looking since it's all exposed to visual appearance here. So we're going to use a clear solvent. And all glue is pretty much clear. There is a few out there that are blue or other colors. In our case, we're using clear. So we first apply the solvent. Now this glue is going to need to set up for about 4 hours before we want to apply pressure to it. So we will do the check later with regard to when the, to make sure we don't have any leaks. So we'll fasten it together now, but we won't be able to test it for about 4 hours according to the instructions on this glue container. One of the reasons I wear an apron in doing this is, as you can see, I have a tendency to get glue all over my hands, and I want to protect the shorts or pants or whatever I'm wearing underneath it. So, good idea to wear something to protect your clothing. Or I have a hands full of handyman clothes in the house that I don't mind getting messed up. But when I'm going to a customer site to do this, I never know what's in store, so I tend to wear reasonable clothing. In other words, I don't want to look like a multicolored cheetah with all the different dirt that I have on that handyman clothes. So I will wear an apron in order to try to preserve my clothes as much as I can. Now this has a little bit of play in it. You can see it kind of dropping down a little bit. It's coming out of the heater in this configuration, and there's really nothing supporting it. It's just at the other end fastened at the heater. So that's why there's a bit of a play in it. But once it's all fastened together, it makes for one solid connection. I will seal up my glue. One thing I'll warn you about on the glue is store it indoors. One of the few things to store indoors is the glue, because it gums up very fast. When we go to put this in, there's a L-shaped nozzle, and we want that nozzle pointed in the direction of flow. So water is flowing from my right to my left. We want it dispensing along that flow. In other words, we don't want to fight the current, we want to go with the current. Any of this water that's coming out of here, good idea to apply some water on these rubber gaskets to get these things in here. And I always recommend one side first. It allows you to have something to anchor to. Kind of see how good I did on that gap. It's pretty tight. That's what I was hoping for. And then we will use a pipe wrench to cinch that bad boy down. Now that glue is still a little bit wet, so I'm only going to give it a little bit of a twist
and I'm going to resist on that side. Same here. I'm going to resist with my other hand because I do not want to twist that glue. Next part of the plumbing side of the equation is the actual air line for the CO2. So we're going to open that up and apply that. Now, this particular solution has with it a valve, a one-way valve, and they even wrote on here to the chamber, to the tank, because they want that to prevent, as water's flowing and there's no air flow and there's no gas flowing, that we're going to not have water backfeed into our solution. So we're going to connect that up. I'm going to seat that all the way down in there. You'll feel it seat. The way to take it out is there's a lift. You lift this little ring up and pop it back out if you need to service it. We're going to uncoil that, and we will use, when we get the other valve hooked up to the CO2 tank, we will use that piece of it. Now, while I'm still down here, I'm going to go ahead and refasten this cable so that we have something to keep it up off the ground, as well as away from any yard maintenance tools like weed whackers, which tend to do a number on cables. We cause any problem like that on a pool, and it's that much more expensive thanks to the general costs of pools. We want to avoid that by putting these back in a secure spot. And we don't want to strap it anywhere near our electrode chamber because that's going to come off. So we're just going to copy where it was before. We're going to give ourselves a little bit of slack here on both ends so that there's some play in that if we take anything off to service it. There we are, essentially putting it back the way we found it, but now with this CO2. So we're going to then hook up the tank. We'll get some footage of that so that you guys can see how that is put together, and the solution will be done. Now these cables here are coming from the old controller, so we're going to wind up taking those out and running the exact same cable, but the cable from the new controller. So this is coming off from the old controller and being replaced with a new one. All right, now we're at the next phase of this project. We have the CO2 tank that we're going to connect into the CO2 dispensing chamber that we just cut into the pipe. I have the solenoid that will open and close it according to what the EcoSmarte controller tells it to do. On here, when you get it, you'll see that there's a little nylon O-ring. You'll have to remove that. I strongly recommend that you keep good tabs of that O-ring, because if you lose it, you're going to get a gap. So I tend to put a nail. So if I'm doing any kind of tank exchange, I'm going to hang that thing where I can always find it so that I am able to maintain control of it. In this case, we're going to use it on the tank. So we're going to put that into the threaded side of this solenoid, and we're going to fasten this on here. If you are going to, what I normally like to do, and I don't have it on this particular solution because I didn't buy the wrench, but this is a 1 1/8 inch wrench, and I like to put the closed round side of the wrench on here and just leave it hanging with this, so I'm not searching for the wrench when it's time to swap it out. It's worth it. I think they're $16 on your average online retailer. Hang it on here, 1 1/8 inch wrench, leave it for this purpose, and that way you're not searching for it. So we're going to go ahead and fasten this down, and you can position it however you need to. You know, if you need to get this thing spun around and maybe you want the cable on this side, or however you want to do it, it's up to you. I've already secured this to one side of it so it doesn't go anywhere, so I'm going to hang it like this, and then I've routed this around the neck of my sand filter so that I can just hook it in there, and then I'll secure these so that, you know, they're not going to get hit by any kind of, you know, dogs running through here or anything like that. We're gonna try to secure this. So first thing we want to do is get this thing tightened down. So I'm hand tightening it right now. It's gonna have a little bit of play in it. This definitely has play in it. And then when you go to cinch this down, it's going to try to rotate. So I tend to give it a little bit of room to rotate. And remember, if you want to test this, you would turn your accessories in the on position for the CO2 dispenser. So there it is. Then we're going to take this, connect it right up. We'll go over the top so I can fasten this down. Give myself some play. I could cut this tube as well, but I feel like I want to have a little bit of play in it. And so we'll put that in there. It'll rotate just fine. And then you're going to want to make sure you turn this on. Now I did put it on a scale, and as expected, it's weighing in right around 45 pounds. So when this scale drops to around 25 pounds, it's time for me to replace this tank. I am going to go buy a second tank, and I'm going to have that readily available so I can just swap and put this one in the car and take it to the welding shop for a refill. But I don't have that second tank at the moment, which is fine. This should last me anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, depending on what the rate of gas I'm putting in the pool. At 40 minutes a day, it's going to last 6 to 8 weeks. But I bet with this size pool, we're probably going to get close to 60 minutes in order to manage the pH. So it's on. We can turn this on. Nothing really should happen because the solenoid is off. There's no water flowing. I've got to be in a state of no water flowing for about 4 hours before I can, challenge that glue. So that is fine. I'm not going to turn anything on. On the other side, we're going to mount that EcoSmarte in the exact same spot as the previous one, and we're going to wait to power everything on after that 4 hours is up. So now our typical path here is to connect up the electrode chamber, and in this scenario it's the same as the prior one. We're going to do red and green to copper, and we're going to do black and white to titanium, or the oxygen side of the solution. So we're just going to mount everything on here. You can mount these on the titanium side, top or bottom. The previous one had longer cables, so we wound up mounting them to the bottom. I'm going to go to the top on this one and to the bottom on the copper side. So those are all connected, and now it's time to reattach those things that I was using in order to protect it. So in this case, for the conductors, power conductors going to the electrode chamber, I'm going to secure that. Now the reason I cut the other one off is it's kind of hardwired into the previous controller, and that's totally fine. The new one came with the exact same connection methods. And we want to do this to kind of neaten up our install, make it look nice and tidy, and we can clip those ends off. So that is it for the plumbing side of the equation. We'll go over to the electrical side and close this project out. Once we get the power on, you'll see that, and then we'll test everything from that.
All right, last stage of our process, we have let the glue on the PVC dry for 4 hours. The sun is lower in the horizon, if you can tell, and we are powered this back on. Now you'll notice that I have all my breakers on except for the pump breaker, and the pump breaker, interesting enough, should also power this on if I wired it correctly, because I wired it to that same line side of the of the appliance. So we're going to kick this on. You're going to hear the pump kick on for a moment, but I will actually cut the pump off so that you can still hear me, because that pump will make a lot of noise. But it's a good test. So here we go. I'm going to cut the pump off for a moment. My EcoSmarte has lit up as I expected. I'm going to make sure that my clock setting matches. So on here it says it's 6:07 p.m. on Halloween, and over here for this it says it's 6:08 p.m. So we're off by a minute. It's fine. And of course the date doesn't matter on this side of it. So it says that the pool is expected to run 8 to 7. If I go to menu and I go to timers, I do have timers from 8 to 7. 8 to 7, so that all matches. And the oxidation is going to happen from 8 to 7 on every day of the week except for Saturday. I have the ionization set for Saturday, and that's great for me to then do my pool testing on Sunday morning. Now the older EcoSmarte, it actually, I use the exact same bolts or threaded screws and in the exact same spot, so it went in the same space. And these are the cables that were removed from the turbo. As I said, the turbo, I had it wired into the relay side or the load side of that relay. So when the pump was on, this was on. When the pump was off, this was off. And obviously it came with the 4 power conductors going to the electrode chamber, and those have come off with the old one. So I now have my system set up. Right now it's applying power to the oxygen side of the titanium. I want water running, so I'm going to kick this thing back on. Here we are running a test of the CO2 dispensing chamber. I have set the accessory to on, and it is putting CO2 into the pool. And you can see the gas flowing through this chamber. By programming it to a timed setting, you'll see this happen 4 times a day, and the time that you set divided by 4. In this case, to start, I have it set for 40 minutes. So 10 minutes at a time, 4 times a day, this is going to happen. And this is intended to keep my pool at a nice, steady 7.0 neutral pH. And that is going to help my sanitation and my algicide coming from the copper be that much more effective. That's it for this video. I hope you guys found this informative. Let me know if you have some questions in the comments. Thanks so much.